Hey, welcome back to another video. The topic for today is going to be, why are dads always rejected? It just seems like it's a normal thing that the fathers are rejected by the children and gravitate toward their mom. I've experienced that. I've experienced that as a father, and I have experienced this as a child as well. And I want to jump into this because there's some key points that you need to think about. And then towards the end of this, then we'll go through ways to deal with it. And first, I'm just going to start out with basically what are the reasons why I think this is even an issue. So let me pull up my screen share. Why are dads always rejected? First thing, societal norms. When you get into this, no matter what, everybody expects that the father is going to be the mean one and the mom is going to be the nurturing one. Even if it's not the case, I had that with my own kids where they assumed that, mommy's the nice one, daddy's the mean one, mommy will be the one to protect our little feelers and stuff like that. And then as I progressed through this, or whenever my kids progressed through this, what ended up happening, and this was really hard for them too. So what ended up happening is that I would end up doing the things that they expected their mom to do, and their mom was doing things they expected me to do, and it was a mind meld, I guess, for lack of a better word. And it really was difficult for the kids, or at least my kids, to deal with that. Now, the flip side to it is that if you fall into those stereotypical tropes, then it makes it that much easier for the parent who's targeting you to be successful, because you're going to fall into what the kids and everyone else thinks, all the innocent bystanders thinks is actually going on. So you got to be really careful about that, and it makes it super tough. I got to figure out where my buttons here. So here's the thing. We all tend to think that it's overt. It's like, okay, Timmy, let me sit down with you and tell you that, your dad's a piece of crap. Repeat after me, daddy's a piece of crap, that type of thing. Now, in some situations that is the case, but more often than not, it's covert narcissism and subtle manipulation. And the example I often use, that you probably heard me say on video before, it's just so sad that your dad, won't let it go. It's so sad that your dad always gets angry. It's so sad that your dad cares about his new girlfriend more than you. It's so sad that all your dad cares about is money, right? And it's basically what I'm trying to say is it's very under the radar. So the kids don't even generally recognize that the other parent is being disparaged, for lack of a better word. Actually, I guess that's probably a perfect word. And it's like that subtle programming. I mean, I had a bunch of conversations with my kids throughout this where, they'd be like, oh, mommy never talks about you. Never, like a bobblehead, oh, no, never. And then in the course of a conversation, there would be something that would come up that would be like, oh, mommy says, you're the sign of the devil. Okay, I'm being sarcastic. It wasn't that overt, but it was something very subtle. I'd be like, hey, wait a minute. What? Well, isn't that saying I'm a horrible human and, yada, yada. And I mean, the one experience I had on that I can remember off the top of my head is I was talking to one of my kids, and they're like, oh yeah, Mr. Tim, mommy was tucking me into bed the other day, and she said that Mr. Timmy, you're trying to get him fired at work. And I'm like, but it was very subtle. So my kids didn't realize that it was, like this subtle programming of, your dad's an evil person and he's trying to do mean things and, yada, yada. So you got to understand that it's not going to be typically overt. And the critical point of this that I want you to think about is what that means is the kids are going to start to think that some of those things are true. And as a result of that brainwashing, for a lot, because effectively that's what it is, they'll start to think that, oh, that's the reality. It kind of goes back to what I was saying, is like, if you fall into the trap of what they're trying to paint you as doing, you're behind the power curve. And this is basically kind of what happened with me and my dad, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So, and this kind of dovetails or rolls into my next point, which is wedge issues. The subtle manipulation is the precursor for finding, cultivating, and trying to create wedge issues between you and your kids. And it's basically just trying to create conflict and get you to respond, and then get to use your response to further their claim that, of what you are, or that, the problems that is you. And it's hard to not fall into that trap, because we feel like we have to engage with these people. We feel like we have to fight everything. And if you look right here at the bullet, responding into it feeds it. Responding feeds into it. So most of the time, your best bet is to pause and not respond. I would say probably 90% of the time when the ex is trying to either use your kids to get a response from you, or directly trying to engage, like, oh, little Timmy wants to burn the house down. Are you worried about that? And you get all freaked out and you start getting involved. And then later you look at it and you're like, wait a minute, nobody was taking this seriously. I freaked out. I took it as it was important. And then you're looking at it going, well, what the hell? I'm sitting here trying to protect little Timmy. And little Timmy is now poking me in the eye saying, why are you being so mean and not letting me express myself? That type of thing. And it's just, you have to keep your eyes open for the wedge issues. You have to. Another example I'll use, and this was early on, and I fell into this, and I hear this from a lot of folks, where the other person, bathing and hygiene of the other kids is completely out the window. So you get little Timmy hasn't bathed, the hair looks nasty, greasy, the whole 9 yards, and you're trying to, like, hey buddy, you probably need to clean up and everything. And then you're hearing that, you won't let them express themselves. You're giving them a hard time. Mine, for me, was the bathing, and it was the hair, and it was so funny in retrospect, because I remember my mom did the exact same thing to me. After the divorce and everything, I'm like, oh, I'm going to let my hair grow long. I'm going to be, blah, blah, blah. Not super long, but just, look like I just, whatever. Part of it is just being a kid. But what a toxic parent will do is they will use that, allow something to happen to basically try to blow it up to get you to respond in a certain way, right? You feel like you have to do your best to take care of your kids, which we have to. But if you fall into the not stereotype, but if you fall into the trap of doing it in a way that seems like it would be okay, seems like it would be normal, but in effect, what's happening, and it goes back up to what I'm talking about, it's a precursor for a wedge issue, where they're trying to cause conflict between you and the kids, or you and them, so that they can then use that interaction to prove their point that you're bad. And then again, that goes back into the covert narcissism and the subtle manipulation, that it's like, see, what's happening. Oh, it's so sad your dad won't let you express yourself. Mommy, and you comes back, Mommy, Daddy beat me up because he said my hair, I look like a fool. Oh, honey, that's so, you look fine. You look great. Everyone has their hair like that. Your dad is just, he's just stuck in the past, and he just, everything has to be his way. It's just so sad that he can't let you be you, and he has to control. He's so controlling. You know how he is, Pumpkin. But it's okay, right? It's that type of thing. It's very, it's not that, you're coming back and you had a great time with your dad, and and the other person in this scenario, the mom is saying, oh, you had a really bad time. Well, no, I didn't, right? I mean, it's where they're finding those little chinks in the armor of the kids. And unfortunately with kids, this is really tough for kids, which actually goes into kids do not understand what is going on. When they're younger, and even remember, most kids in these scenarios are emotionally delayed. So what that means is when you're dealing with, a 15-year-old or a 19-year-old or whatever, they're not really emotionally at that age. They're delayed. And then on top of everything that's been going on, they're so confused by the mixed messaging that they're getting that they don't really know what to believe. So it makes it really tough for the kids to understand what's going on. Now, it's really frustrating, and I'll get in that into the next part of this. But you got to keep that in mind so that you don't drive yourself crazy, and which then that kind of rolls into how do you deal with it, or how did I deal with it? Kind of was what I'm talking about. These are the things that I looked at on this. So the first thing right off the bat, since basically I was obviously a target of this post-divorce, but also with my own parents, I remember the relationship I had with my dad. It was very conflicted, and now with a clearer mind on it, I can see how my mom was manipulating that. And I fell into, like a lot of the things I talk about with you guys, I fell into, right? When I say you got to be worried about your kids feeling responsible for the other parent. I say that because that's what happened to me. There was a period of time where my younger brother went to go live with my dad full time, primarily because my mom couldn't manipulate him. So because he was younger, and younger kids typically don't it's harder for them to be manipulated because they don't understand the nuances of what's going on, right? So it's like that before 8 years old and post 8 years old, it's a really tough time because as younger the kids are, they don't know that, oh crap, I can't say certain things around mommy or daddy because it creates a problem. I mean, I saw that. I mean, I had that when I was a kid, and it happened to my own brother. But I also saw that with my kids. There were times where the youngest would say, like 6, 7 years old, would say something, and one of the other kids would physically whack them, telling them to stop talking because you're not supposed to talk about that. And they're like, what? What do you mean? Why can't I talk about it? That type of thing. Anyways, so that's kind of the way, I approached that. Hold on, let me get back over here. That's a lot of the ways I approach my situation is I look for the traps that I can now recognize that I fell into as a kid and that I fell into as a parent, and the traps that I fell into with my own father. So the problem is back in the day, I'm not a spring chicken. I'm 50 some odd years, 53 years old. So, I've been on this planet for a long time. And when my dad was going through this, there wasn't this abundance of information to tap into to help you deal with it. So all of us are kind of fortunate living in this YouTube, social media scenario situation to where a Google search or a YouTube search, and you can find some information to help you deal with and to think about and frame what you're dealing with so that you don't fall into the traps. And the sad part is that all of this is a ton of traps. So I was kind of mentioning this before, but so what I would often do now is I would look back at what my dad did with me that didn't help, actually hurt it. I remember being younger and even into my, early adulthood days or whatever. There were a lot of times where I really wanted a relationship with my dad. I really wanted him to reach out, and I felt like I was constantly being rejected by him. It took me a long time to realize what was actually happening is I was rejecting him, and his defense mechanism to keep himself from going insane, because as we all know, this is the most horrible, brutal, evil thing a person can go through. And when your kids are basically being turned against you, it's really tough to deal with. And typically people deal with it in, well, you deal with it in a way to protect yourself. I mean, that can manifest itself in a bunch of different ways. It can be, I mean, the most typical is you start putting up a barrier with your children to protect your own soul, your own heart, however you want to talk about it. That's exactly what he did. And, you know, the problem is, and it kind of rolls back into the wedge issues, what ends up happening then is it makes it even easier for the other parent to sit there and try to play games to point that out, to like really poke that nerve, so to speak, so that the kid is really feeling that pain of loss and rejection from the other parent, not realizing that because of the scenario being so horrible, to keep the sanity of the other person, they put these barriers up to protect themselves. Exactly what happened with me. Now, the key point about that is when I started my situation, I kept remembering that, so I tried to not shut down. I came really close. There were a couple of times in the early part of this, we're talking about 12, 13 years ago, a long time ago, over a decade ago when this whole thing started, where I actually was starting to, because I thought I was going to lose. I thought she was going to get full custody. I thought she was going to be able to move out of state. And I'm like, I have to mentally prepare myself, because if I don't have a way to deal with this, it's going to destroy me if this goes south. Now, it didn't go south. I was able to maintain 50-50 custody, I didn't maintain it. I achieved it. I prevented her from leaving the state and that whole scenario, right? So, but there were a handful of times where I started backing away from the children and just kind of putting up a mental barrier, which you absolutely know that was being used against me. And you have to be careful about that. That's a real problem, and you have to look at it. So, and this is kind of rolls into my final point that I really want to hit on this is very demoralizing. And I've even talked to some people who are farther along in this, who, you know, kids are like late teens and stuff like that. And they're just like, what, you know, I've done everything. I've always been there. I mean, and I've done that too. I mean, I've been there for my kids. If they needed something, I do it. And who do they always pick? They always pick their mom. You know, it's like, pick me, and always reject dad. So, but you get stuck in a position to where it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? Do you close the door and move on with your life? You're basically like, okay, I lost. I'm not doing this anymore. And there can be a time where that is the appropriate response, because you've lost, right? I mean, the kids are at a point to where they just don't get it. You're not able to have any inroads. And for your own sanity, that's an option. Now, what I will tell you is most of the time with the people that I've dealt with over the last few years, if they get to the point and they make that, it's like, okay, it is what it is. I'm going to stop beating my head against the wall, and I'm going to close the door, but they keep it open, right? And what I mean by that is if you can keep it open, most of the time, the kids will reach back out. I have one person I've dealt with that I've been working with, just thinking off the top of my head, where he kind of had this scenario, a strange relationship with his daughter, and it finally just came to a head, and he's like, okay, fine, you know, Pumpkin, what do you want? You know, I hate you. I don't, you know, you need to stop, you know, whatever. You need to give me space. And he's like, okay, I don't like it, but I'm going to do it. And the kid never expected him to do it. The kid was looking for conflict, had been programmed with the wedge issues, with the subtle manipulation that, you know, that your dad's always going to be in the middle of this and trying to control things or whatever. And he was able to take a step back. And to be honest, in this particular scenario, it actually happened faster than I anticipated. I figured it would take probably a year, but within like 2 months, I got a note from him saying she's reaching out to me. She's sending me texts, and I'm like, okay, well, that's good. You know, I mean, is she asking you for something? And it wasn't like, you know, and I do have somebody else I work with where the reach outs are cruel. You know, they're looking for money or whatever. But this one was, you know, like, hey, you know, look at this. This is a funny meme, you know, that type of thing. So it was a way to open the door. Now, the key point on that is it can be really easy when you are demoralized, like still on the screen if you're watching this, to where you have it shut down, that whenever they are trying to open the door, they are trying to reestablish some type of communication, you don't do it because you're so hurt, justifiably so, and not wanting to put yourself potentially back in emotional harm's way because, you know, you let them back in emotionally, then there's a potential / possibility that they're going to do something again to, you know, basically boop, poke you in the eye, just like the ex would poke you in the eye. Here's the thing. If at all possible, let me pull this back up so it's on the screen. If at all possible, try to keep the door open. I completely understand. And I've had people comment with me, and it's like whenever I say, you know, that I fell into this same trap with my own father, they're like, well, you're a scumbag and, you know, you deserve hell and brimfire and, you know, whatever, because they're so angry at their own kids. And I get it. I understand that. But, you know, it's so tough because we lose so much time and we lose out on things that should be good memories, or even worse, we have good memories and then the ex is able to reframe those experiences to where they turn negative, to where it's like it never happened and you feel like you're just a constant punching bag. But, you know, at the end of the day, if you can leave, quote unquote, I call it leaving the door open, to where there's a pathway for a relationship or a restoration of relationship, and you can, you know, facilitate that, then I think that's the best case scenario. I mean, there's a lot of pitfalls with that too, because it can take memories and emotions that you haven't dealt with. And let me just say this, it's really important you deal with the emotions, because the surefire way for this to be a bigger train wreck than it needs to be is that you don't deal with the emotions. You just put it in a box, you put it under the bed, you ignore it. And then what happens is whenever that door does open up, you're not thinking about it in a clear mind. You're now refeeling the trauma associated with an event that may have happened 5-10 years ago that you can't let go of because you haven't let go of it. And it corrupts the opportunity for you to try to fix it. Now, here's the thing. If you deal with it and you work through those emotions to where it doesn't have any effect on you anymore, then the positive of that is if this scenario doesn't happen where the kids come back and the door isn't knocked on, so to speak, you still get your life back. You still make your peace with it. And the power that this has over you and the power that the ex has over your emotions evaporates. So that's a positive. Excuse me, that's a positive. And then the second positive is that if it does happen, then you're not sitting there refeeling these emotions, and you can actually focus on rebuilding a relationship that you have every right to think and feel that should have never been at risk anyways. But unfortunately, that's the scenario we live in. So curious what you think about this. Want to know if this conversation was helpful. Leave your comments down below. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you know somebody who's struggling with this, share it with them so maybe they won't feel so alone, and maybe there's some takeaways out of this discussion that might help them to deal with their own situation. All right, on that, take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.